What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? I am joined by my friend, Miss Rhonda Mary, and we're going to be talking about the VP debate. What's going on, Rhonda?
Not too much. Look, dude, like you have super surpassed me with this dope. Like you gotta put me up on game. Like whatever the light is popping, got like the beard glowing and just looking angelic over here. I'm like, what I gotta be like? What I gotta do to be this cool? You know,
Hey, you were my inspiration to get into video more seriously.
really.
So
And I'm trying to get like you and get into podcasting, but it's just the like what we do is it's a lot.
yeah,
I don't know if like the normie kind of just knows everything that goes into all that. So
yeah, it's a lot. Someone who like picked up on all of it slowly over the course of some years. It's just it, sometimes I amaze myself with how much I've learned in the time since I started. I started podcasting around the same time you started doing YouTube, and
ain't that so crazy?
yeah, yeah, because we met before either of us had any of that, so it's crazy.
Mhm,
It's
mhm.
crazy how we've both grown, but that's what passion and drive will take you. And somebody needs to talk about the stuff we're talking about because,
Exactly.
good Lord knows, man. Um, I don't even know really where to start with this, but I guess we can start here. In contrast to it, to the Trump Biden debate, how do you feel that Kamala and Pence handled themselves on stage?
So I will say this, and I'm like tweeting. Well, not tweeting. 'Cause I was banned off Twitter,
I can't
but I'm
believe they that's just still wild to me.
I'm like reposting this so like people can know that we're live now.
Okay.
But so I will say that initially like going into it, I'm like dozing off and I'm like let me stay up cuz if I fall asleep, Haize is going to be like what? Like really, Rhonda, really? Um and so initially I was like, you know, I just couldn't keep up. Pence is notorious for speaking in a very monotone, you know,
Yep.
thing that he has going on. And so initially I was like tapping out, but towards the end of the debate,
It
it
picked up.
absolutely 100% picked up. The end of the debate was the highlight.
Yeah.
Okay. Was the highlight of the debate. So I will say that for anyone that hasn't watched and won't, maybe will end up going back to watch or maybe watching replays or whatever, you can skip through about half of it. Okay. Otherwise, I think it was handled very well. Um, in contrast, right, to Trump and Biden.
Yeah.
Everybody got a chance to speak. Okay. They got a chance for rebuttals. You didn't feel like the moderator was coming in being a third panelist because if you allow a person to speak, then next is your turn. So the moderator can answer the question and go on about their business.
Yeah.
Um, so I will just say overall, as far as like it didn't have the same entertainment reality TV show value, right? And that's
Mhm.
what happens when you have somebody like Donald Trump, who is very much known for his entertainment value. So if that's what anybody was looking for, no, it did not have that. However, you had an opportunity for these people to somewhat, answer for their actual record. And so as far as what I would like to see, this was more along the lines of that.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a more traditional debate. You still ran into, of course, Pence cutting off the moderator, and Kamala. It seemed like she kept her composure way more than Biden did, with not cutting off. And even at one point, she kind of let Pence have the floor, even though he cut her off, and then she asked for her a
Her
allotted amount
time
of
back.
time afterwards. But let's start there because Pence did go over his time a lot during it. Now it ended up, I actually got the numbers. So he actually only got 3 seconds more of total talk time than what Kamala got when it was all said and done. But him repeatedly stepping on the moderator, stepping on Kamala, What do you think about that? To me, that's just normal. That happens in almost every
That's
debate.
what I
So
was
this
about to
is more
say.
normal. Yeah.
I don't take that as he stepped over the moderator or he did it so many times. I didn't view it that way at all. Like
Mhm.
if you've been in actual debates, it's gonna be moments where not necessarily saying it has to get like heated or rude or confrontational because I honestly think both of them did well with like keeping their composure
Mhm.
and being respectful, right, of each other. I think they did well in that regard. So I don't, I'm not under the belief that, oh, he was just so talking over the moderator. Like sometimes it's going to be points where it's like, nah, I got to get this last little point out,
Mhm.
especially, right? Especially if you are calling my record into question. It was one point towards the end. Um, where he called out her criminal justice record in California,
Yeah.
and the moderator wanted to skip to the next question, and she's like, nah, like he called out my record, like I
Yeah.
have to allow me to address this in front of the American people. And one thing that I noticed at another point that Pence did that I really liked was he couldn't finish his answer on a
Mhm.
previous question,
So
so he
use this
used
time.
his time on the next question to follow it up, so he kind of split it in half. And that was one of my pushbacks against Trump from the previous debates, because I was like, why not just follow what the moderator is saying, and then when it's your time to talk, just say what the heck you want again? Like,
Yeah. It's your time. You can say whatever you want to, whether it's
right,
on the question or not.
right,
Um,
absolutely.
Yeah. And so like to get into some of the again, we're going live pretty much right after the debates, but to get on some of just the critiques that have been on each one of the candidates after this is that for Pence, it's his lack of answers on certain things. He went back to the tax thing a few times early on in the debate and didn't have a lot of specific answers. And Kamala, she didn't answer a couple of things herself either. She talked around the New Day deal thing. She also talked around the Supreme Court if they're going to be packing the House and adding more seats. What do you think about those critiques on each one of the candidates?
I feel like they're completely valid. And I feel like, if we're talking about who tried to evade questions more, I would
Mhm.
have to absolutely say it was Kamala. She
Mm,
actually she actually came into the debate. The first few minutes I was like, oh, so we doing the whole politician thing tonight. Like we just not gonna answer questions. I think it has something to deal with COVID and how would your no, the moderator, and why I noticed this, why this stuck out to me so much is because it's something I specifically want to know. The moderator, I think it was the possibly the first question asked her, um, how would your administration respond to COVID? Would you do a national mask mandate, and also
mhm,
asked about lockdowns? Those were two specific points that me watching as a viewer, somebody that has consistently talked about COVID, I want to know what your administration would do about this. She completely dodged the question. She tried to flip it back on like the Trump administration and people that died and stuff like that, which
mhm.
is valid. However, I want to know these things specifically, and I'm not the only person that wants to know. I'm sure a lot of viewers, want to know, because that is going to affect, the direction of the country and things like that.
Yeah,
Um,
I think her response to that was her exact response was when she pointed out the fact that Trump's campaign hasn't followed the rules. So how do they expect American people to? Which, like you said, is a valid thing because they didn't. That's part of the reason why there's so many COVID cases going on in the Republican Party now. But still, I can understand your point of that of wanting to hear firm. What are your policies going to be if you get elected on how we're gonna maintain COVID? So that's a good point there.
Right. And something that people have to remember, and I talked about this on my live, this was last night, and it's something that Pence actually brought up. And the crazy thing about it is the more I listen to him, he's actually a much better debater than I assumed he would be.
Hmm.
Maybe I assumed his style would be like more like Trump, because it was a lot of times Trump would not say the thing that me, as somebody that kind of pays attention to like what's going on, and what the legislators are doing. It would be some things that would just seem so obvious. Like, why don't you just respond with the most obvious answer? Not only the obvious answer, but for people that may not pay attention to legislation, they don't
Hmm.
really know what's going on throughout the year, this is your chance to let them know what your administration has done and some of the truth of, like filtering through some of the BS of the media, right?
Yeah.
So I actually happened to talk about this on my live last night, but something people have to remember is the original projections for COVID cases, like fatalities, was like crazy, like hella high. It was like 2 million
Yeah.
people. You know what I mean? So now we are currently at 10% of that. Will we call that a failure? You know what I mean? And I guess it just depends on how you're looking at this. Another good point he brought up was swine flu, the numbers with the swine flu and how it was dealt with. So to think that any country will be able to go uh through a pandemic with like no fatalities, I think it's just ridiculous. And
Yeah.
then when you add that on top of the original projections and things like this, and there are still numbers that are coming out that, like, it was just literally a report, I think just yesterday, that came out in Arizona about how numbers were skewed.
Hmm.
So I'm under the belief that I don't even think we're actually going to get the real numbers until like much, much later.
Yeah, and yeah, Kamala early on with the COVID talk focused on the fact that the cabinet knew, Trump's cabinet knew, administration, I should say, knew January 28th is when they found out, and they got information about COVID. They didn't relay any information or really take any steps until March. What do you think about focusing on that? Like, do you view that more as a scare tactic being used, or do you think that even with the numbers being way less than the original projections, that even more lives could have been saved had they acted sooner?
So that's pretty much a loaded question.
Hmm.
It depends on how we would have wanted them to act. Because think about this, even if you knew in early January, we didn't really know at that point, to my understanding, the precautions to take. Early on, you had Dr. Fauci saying, "Oh, we don't need masks," right?
Hmm.
Even as more people started to get the virus, they said 2 weeks for the spread of the virus. So something we have to remember with something like a pandemic, even now, information is constantly changing. There's
Hmm.
more information being added. We are still learning about the virus. We're still, they're still like testing vaccinations. They're testing different type of medicines, and you know all these different things, right? So it's really hard to say even early on without the doctors, because nobody knew what the heck was happening.
Yeah.
Back in January, we didn't know. Yes, and even then, right, you have to remember there were some politicians like, don't close the border, go to Chinatown, go hang out, eat some Chinese food. You know what I mean? So, like, seriously, so I think it was just too much in the air.
Hmm.
And to say, oh, well, this should have been done, or the administration should have handled this. So, this is something way before COVID that me and my friend used to always talk about, is that, for example, like, if we knew, so he used to just ask me this jokingly. He was like, if you knew that aliens existed and there was life on other planets and you were the president, like, would you tell people? And so, like, a question like that makes you think about, like, it's a lot of things that goes into that, right? Because
Hmm.
it depends on I think of kind of like parenting styles, right? You have some parents that are just upfront with their kids. They're just like, bam, this is what it is. This is how this works. And then you have some parents that it depends on the response that they're gonna get, it depends on, are you trying to like shelter them, shelter their feelings, and find out more information about, whatever is at hand and stuff like that. So um I don't every time they so basically what I'm saying to sum this up is, every single time I hear somebody saying, "Oh, you should have done something earlier. You knew in January." I never hear them following up with saying what that actually should have been. What based on the information we had in January,
Hmm.
what could have been done at that point? Because you got to remember, at that point, nobody was wearing masks. Nobody was saying that mask had. Now, some of the things that were being said were like ventilators. Well, kind of early on. This may have still been in March too, I
Yeah.
think. But some of the things that were being said earlier on were like the ventilators, and it was something else. But nobody was talking about lockdowns back in January. That was conclusions they were coming to going into like February, March, and things like that. So
Yeah. And so, and one of the things is we start talking about like COVID and stuff, and we'll eventually get into healthcare um, that Kamala stuck on, and she pointed out, is that Trump and his administration has not always been forthcoming or honest about information being about coronavirus and COVID, things about, but it's kind of been misleading, or information has changed. Travel restrictions, the testing, ventilators, the stockpile of them, and even about the virus itself. When you hear about some of the things that Trump has contradicted himself with, because I know you're somebody who's fair, you're not just someone who's automatically, F Trump or whatever else that some people are. Do you attribute that to just still figuring out the information? Do you see that maybe he was trying to maintain some of the worry and concern down, or do you outright call it out as a lie? And does it concern you? What do you think about that?
So I think we have to look at all these things differently, right? I don't
Hmm.
I It's no broad answer I could give for that, right? So if we're talking about masks, that's one thing. If we're talking about ventilators, right? That's
Hmm.
something totally different. If we're talking about medications, that's totally different. So to just say, "Oh, it was this broad lie and he's just been misleading," I just don't think that's the case. To just say that overall, I think as new information has come out, things have been revived, right? Even if we're talking about masks, there is still, um, you know, debatable depending on the scientists whose information you're taking in. And even now,
Hmm.
it's kind of weird to watch. It's kind of weird to watch so many people who, like, if they're social distancing and wearing masks, people still freaking out about like people gathering and things like this. So I
Hmm.
don't know. It's just odd, right? And so if we're talking about something like N95 compared to me, I wear a bandana. Like, I wear a bandana as a mask,
Hmm.
right? I like somebody was passing gas when I was on the plane the other day, and I could smell it through my freaking bandana. I'm like, are you kidding me? You know what I mean? So that's just something I do. However, knowing that so many schools, airlines, grocery stores don't have an actual regulation for the type of mask you have to have. Something about that just doesn't sit right with me. I've watched on YouTube where this person did this experiment with a different type of mask and showing, um basically like the basically kind of showing the level of like fluid, or whatever that could disperse through the masks,
Hmm.
and the level of efficiency for each mask, right? So my homegirl that works in the ER, she will wear a N95. Now you have people. I went to the hair store today. They're selling masks in there. Do we really think that there are like seriously?
Regulations. Yeah, no, I
Do we
understand what you
really
mean.
think
Yeah.
there are regulations for these masks? You know what I mean? And so, like, it's still much. It's just too much that I just feel like we're still we're still learning. Like even some research that I've done, and this is still not even highly known or accepted yet. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of getting off the
Yo,
debate
you're
a little
fine. You're
bit.
fine. Yeah.
But even with the ventilators, right? There's new information that has come out that suggested that people going onto the ventilators were dying at a higher rate had they not gone onto ventilators. So just think about that. Think about if I say that which one is this? Andrew Cuomo, right? You had
Mhm.
Andrew Cuomo going on national TV in March begging for ventilators. We need ventilators. It's Trump's fault we're not getting ventilators. Is it fair for me to say, now knowing what I know about how ventilators have basically been killing people? That's what they've been doing, okay? Is it fair for me to now go back and blame Bill de Blasio because of something he believed in February and March, along with several doctors who actually thought, doctors that have worked alongside my friends, right?
Mhm.
That thought maybe ventilators are the way. Turns out ventilators were in fact hurting people. Should I now turn around and say, Bill de Blasio, you were a liar and a killer? Or should I say there's new information that has become available now today? If you don't follow the new uh information, now you will look, totally irresponsible. And
That's fair.
you know,
Yeah.
so the COVID thing, man, it's just been really crazy and a really unfortunate situation for everybody.
Definitely, definitely. And it's one of those things to where, and much with this campaign and the debates, this is not one of those times where I feel like you learn much new. What these debates are doing are they are strengthening already beliefs in one of these administrations or not. Like that's all this is doing. It's not much new information coming out. It's attacking the problems they have with the other side and strengthening things that they've already been out speaking about with their own campaigns. That's the main thing here. One thing that both Kamala Harris and Pence both dodged the question on equally was the question about presidential how was it phrased? Let me get presidential disability. And the moderator had pointed out how either way, one of these two are going to be vice presidents to the oldest president America has ever seen. And
Mm-hmm.
so they both dodged those questions. What do you think? How do you think that they handled it? Because it's very well and very possible that one of these two people at some point in the next 4 years, the vice presidents, may end up running the country. Let's just be honest. It's a very possibility was us having two of the oldest presidential candidates ever. What do you think about that and how they handled it?
I absolutely agree that they dodged the question. I hadn't even realized the moderator said that these will be whoever wins will be like the oldest president in history.
Mm-hmm.
And I had not even realized that. So that just blew my mind. I absolutely agree with how you say that the debates kind of, for the most part, solidify a
Mm-hmm.
person's candidate or how or who they're supporting. However, I still think that it is also a time to, like, for example, if you support a certain candidate and you're in your echo chamber, you only watch one type of news. You only watch I call them news talk show hosts, okay? Cuz I don't think they're real journalists. But it does give you a chance to kind of hear these people's perspective
Mm-hmm.
in real time. And so I do think it is some value to that. But the disability question, yeah, I don't think they answered it as all at all. I think we're here now. It's nothing, Simone Sanders told us there would never be another old white man that would be able to run this country, and here we
Yeah.
are looking at two old white men.
Yep.
So I don't know what the heck is going on. I mean, but here we are. Apparently, this is what the people want. If this is not what the people wanted, it's certainly what the man behind the curtain wanted. So I mean, that's just where we are with it.
We're gonna have to save the man behind the curtain for another live stream, because I tell like, the moment you said that, I almost started to go into it, and I'm like, you know what? Let's keep this on the debate, because
Okay.
that's that rabbit hole that I feel like once people pay attention and once you start realizing it, you never look like I've talked about on this week the episode of my podcast. Like I second guess everything I see in the media now, sports, politics, religion, everything, because once you start going down that rabbit hole, that's like letting the opening Pandora's box. You never see the world the same way
But
again.
let me tell you though, my first reaction is to think that that's so unhealthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, the more I learn, it's probably more unhealthy to believe everything
Yeah.
these people say and to not question it. But you're absolutely right. Like once you see this stuff, you cannot unsee it. And when I tell you we are living in probably like the most whacked out times. There is like manipulation and lies and just
Mm,
evilness coming from every freaking angle. It's maddening. And so, me as a person, I've almost completely separated myself from the mainstream news media. I read everything. I read all of my news. I don't watch pretty much any type of news anymore unless it's like people are already talking about it, and so it's like a viral thing. And so as a YouTuber, as a commentator, I have to know what's going on, so I may go back and watch like those viral clips or to see this, what this person said and things like
mhm.
that. But just far as constantly watching it, like turning on my news every night, no.
Yeah, it's that I trust independent media more than mainstream media. Like I still watch it because you kind of have to know what's going on and to know where you're trying to be led to. But independent media is almost always the way to go. But again, that's that rabbit hole we can get into at another time. One thing that was clearly going to be brought up: Trump's taxes. Kamala, and this is I think where the turning point started happening for Kamala, where she started addressing the American people directly. She did it with healthcare too, saying if you have
Mhm,
pre-existing conditions, they're coming for you. She
mhm,
ended that round, if we're calling them that,
mhm.
on looking directly into the camera at the American people and saying that.
I
One other
think that
thing,
was probably her highest moment of
yeah,
the debate.
that and the social injustice thing she got really passionate about. In the once she said that if we're gonna do a history lesson, she lived it up then too. But with something that I expected to be more in the Biden Trump debate was Trump's taxes. Kamala laid it all out here, saying that how much he paid in taxes, and the fact mentioning that $400 million in debt, and saying we need to know who the president owes money to. What do you think about this coming out? And then Pence really didn't say much to it, but at the same time, how do you expect him to defend somebody else's taxes? So I don't hold that against him in this, but I do like the fact that Kamala addressed it head on, and I feel like that's one of the balls that Biden dropped in his debate. What do you think?
So, I think she was absolutely justified to address it. However, I haven't looked super deep into the whole tax thing. To if I remember correctly, this is not the first time within this 4 years that people have come out and said, "Oh, he paid like this amount of dollars," or "He didn't pay this." So at this point, I'm not even sure if it's like hearsay or whatever the case may be. I think he may have addressed it, Trump himself, in the first debate,
Mhm.
saying that it wasn't true. But, like we have to, so to put things into perspective, like if so my opinion on this is that if it's not illegal, like there's no crime.
Hmm.
So like that's just my belief. Like if it's not a crime, it's just not a crime. Now, can you say, oh, technically he took advantage of the tax system? I mean, I suppose, but however, when you're looking at a Republican president, and just like I don't know if we're trying to get this deep into this. I'm sorry.
No,
Right.
go for it. Don't hold back. Go get it.
But when you have people that are that own companies, own corporations, are creating jobs and all of this, a lot of times they are afforded certain you know opportunities because of the risk, right? The
Hmm.
risk that they're taking. And this is not, I'm not pointing to one particular person. I'm just saying overall. And even me as somebody that's trying to learn like more about this stuff, and a lot of the stuff that's afforded to us that I think we're just not knowledgeable about. I don't know. I'm gonna take that discussion a whole different route,
I
if you
mean, when you have a businessman, right, and someone who the one thing that people can't take away from Trump is his prowess with business, and being the economics and the money guy, right? And I think what H&R Block exists to help people find cuts in taxes.
right,
So I get it. I get the people who defend it with saying, well, everyone try, it's not, what he did is not necessarily illegal, but that's why Biden said he's going to eliminate the Trump
right,
cuts, because if somebody can benefit that much, who makes that much money, to pay less than the example he used, a school teacher, then there's a problem in the system in that case, and it needs to be fixed. Go ahead.
one thing I want to say, particularly, right, when us with us being people of melanin,
Hmm.
we are punished oftentimes for our lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
It happens all the freaking time, by our lack of knowledge, by us not knowing what the heck is going on, by us getting our information from people who seek to victimize us, or whatever the case may be. We miss out on hella opportunities. I do not think that's by accident. Like, even if you look at the freaking school systems, we know the public school systems, we know what they teaching our children. We know what they're teaching them is not um beneficial to the standpoint of actually helping them have a productive life.
Hmm.
It is for them to become a worker for somebody else. So if you are not willing to shift out of that, um if you are not willing to shift out of that mentality, you are going to be on the losing end every single time. Now, we can talk about all day, okay, bam, I know that's Joe Biden's platform. I understand that. And we could talk about all freaking day what will happen, what can happen, what should
Hmm.
happen. But I want to convince people that you should be um taking, the benefit and the opportunity to take benefit of everything available to you. People are just going to feel some type of way because it's Trump. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, they don't like Trump. You already don't like him. So to you, it's like, oh, this is criminal. If there was a actual crime committed, I 100% am on board for wanting him to be held responsible. 100%
Hmm.
has to be, right? If you got moms that are going to prison, for a story recently came out with some lady was trying to get health care or something, she's going to prison, right? You got people that look like us, they send their kids across the river, they want to put a different address down to send them to a better school. you go to prison, you get prison time. You got some of these teachers that have cheated the system to you remember the teachers, I think they were in Atlanta trying to
Oh
help
yeah,
them boost their kids' scores
yeah.
so their kids can have better opportunities. They're held responsible. I want to see those same penalties for everyone. Everyone. However, right? Because I'm just a consistent person. It's just me. So if people are going to be held accountable for crimes, for criminal activity, I want to see that across the board. However, if there are going to be people that are working through things made to benefit them, or if you know more, or you're able to learn about this, or you're able to take advantage of this in a way that's not only beneficial but non-criminal, hell, I want to do it too. I'm trying
Yeah.
to learn all this stuff about taxes now, and it hit different when they ain't taking it just right out of your check. You got to pay it yourself every quarter. You know what I mean? You got to write that check to the government. So, shoot, I'm trying to learn everything I can, see what I can pull off.
Definitely, I feel that. One thing that I think I want to make sure that we do get a chance to touch on, and that's because let's just we're black. Clearly, we're African American. So the topic of racial injustice came out, and something that I expect is going to blow up in our community on Twitter or whatever is Pence saying that he trusts the justice system and he basically doesn't believe in systemic racism. I understand he's a Republican. I didn't really expect the answer to be anything different. Do you think in seeing what we've seen over the last year, if you even don't want to take the last 15 years anymore, do you think saying that the system is not broken, or there's not, to just blindly trust the justice system is going to hurt him more than what maybe he thought when he made that system? Because we've seen for the first time probably in forever white people being as upset on the front lines and protesting some as black people with this. Do you think that's going to hurt him in the long run, making that statement?
I don't think it's going to hurt him in the long run. And the funny part about that answer is I was like, man, that was trash. Like, that was a
Yeah.
weak answer, until he actually followed up with what I might not fully say was completely redeemable, but I think a lot of people, particularly his supporters, may find so. He followed it up with, basically, he called her record into question.
Yep.
He's
And we're gonna
basically
get into that
like,
next. Yeah.
you're saying all this, but you literally did nothing in California to suggest you give a crap about Black lives. He said, me and the president worked on a First Step Act. We let people out of prison. You were nowhere to be found. Tim Scott, a Republican, did a legislation on qualified immunity. You voted it down. So it's you can hashtag and say all these beautiful words all freaking day. However, if your record does not stand by what you're saying, what the heck are you even talking about? So initially, and I was surprised. I was actually surprised by the moderator that they didn't have way more questions about like racism and especially with, like, her being the first like Black woman VP and all this other stuff. But so originally, like, I was listening. I was like, man, this answer's trash. This about to be a failure. I mean, but then he came back and hit her with some real talk. So
And she responded back to that with that her record would not be questioned. She also adamantly stated that they're going to ban chokeholds, decriminalize marijuana possessions, retroactively go in and lessen charges that people have gotten for marijuana. And while I do hope that happens, I call for that. That's something that I want. But to adamantly say right away that one of the first things they're going to do in their office is do it for sure, that's misleading in the sense that, and don't get me wrong, I love Kamala. My vote is going for Kamala. Let me bury that lead now. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to call out shit that I see and that I have a problem with. to adamantly state that, like, you, the day you get elected, you just sign a bill and that all goes away. That's not how it works. And for people who don't pay attention to politics, who really every 4 years is the only time they pay to it, I see that as something that's meant to rile people up,
Absolutely.
and it's not going to be as easy as that. And that's
Absolutely.
always been problematic. And don't get me wrong, there's every politician has said something of that sense that is going to be easy, and it's just not. But that bothered me a little bit. What do you think about that?
I absolutely 100% agree with you. I think on a very surface level, for people that just like to kind of hear some of those more like "I got you" moments, I do think in that regard it would have been powerful, because he talked about her record, like
Mhm.
what you have done versus what we have done. The only thing I heard her say was, they were like the first state to require like body cameras and things like that. And
Mhm.
even that, like, how well has that worked so far when we have what the hell does it matter if you have to have the body cameras but you never have to release the footage?
Mhm.
Like, you see what I'm saying? That
Mhm.
is happening right now in this guy, this Jonathan Price case that's recently happened. In another case, it's so much stuff going on, and it kind of gets screwed up in my mind. But you can't just talk about like the feel good stuff without the totality of the solution and how these things work. And also, to your point, to negate the fact that we have a Congress. We have a Congress,
Mhm.
literally, that writes legislation that a president signs off on. So this idea, even with Trump's, some of my biggest pushback on him, stop signing these freaking empty executive orders. As a leader, you have to be able to get people on board for the things
Mhm.
that you care about. Now, area where he actually did that very well was the First Step Act, right? A lot of people gave my boy Kanye hell because he went up to the Oval Office. And let me be clear, I do have a T-shirt that I'm currently selling.
Go ahead and
Okay,
plug it because they got to get it. Go ahead and plug
that
it.
I'm currently selling. Okay, it says entertainers are not leaders. All right. So with that message, I do not want people at Kanye, like Kanye West and Killer Mike and T.I. and Jeezy the Snowman. I don't want nor need these people going to the office, the Oval Office, to speak on my behalf. However, I cannot negate the the impact that, okay, Kanye West goes up here, talks to Trump about, criminal justice reform.
Mhm.
Trump is like, okay, cool, I'll think about that. Let's see what we can do. And then he literally starts saying, you know what? I not only is this something I'm gonna support, I'm gonna get other people on board. I'm gonna tell the other Republicans that would typically not sign something like this, you need to get on board. So he goes to Mitch McConnell and says, you need to get on board with this. You need to make sure that we get it up through the Senate. And then this happens to end up passing, right?
Mhm.
With I guess I could say overwhelming support after they did a couple of revisions. That's the signs of a good leader. Getting your Congress saying, hey, this is something I believe in, this is something I support. Now I am going to try to sway other members of Congress to get on board as well. um and so, unless Kamala Harris is going to be able to do that, to your point, people have to remember at home watching, it's just not a yeah, because I want people to be able to get out of jail for like marijuana charges. I want
Mhm.
marijuana to be, decriminalized and all these other things. However, we have to look at the role pharma, right? Pharma is going to play in this. We have to look at the role that the prison industrial complex, when you have people that make money off filling up these beds, how they're going to respond to these things, right? So that's also another reason why you also have to see who is funding these candidates, because it'll kind of let you know sometimes which way they'll end up swaying.
Yeah, and then Kamala also saying how they're going to get rid of private prisons. That's something that again, I hope for, because there's no reasons that we need to have private prisons, because all that does is keep it going with the whole locking people up because it's more financially beneficial to have people in prison. So I understand that, but again, then what? Because there are not some, there are people in private prisons that need to be in prison. So then what's going to happen when prisons are overrun? Like, there has to be a plan in place. Like, it sounds good, it's a great bullet point to say, but I wanted to hear your plan for how you're going to do it. And it was towards the end of the debate, so there wasn't time for it. But that's something that I would have loved to hear. Okay, what is your plan to get rid of private prisons? Are you going to take those buildings now? You're going to take them over. The government's going to take them over. They're no longer going to be private and monetized.
Are
Okay,
you gonna buy them out? Like,
exactly. What does that rollout look like? I want to hear stuff like that, because hearing things getting uh demonetized and stuff like that is all great and dandy. Like, it's great, but where's the plan for it?
you can't demonetize something your money doesn't go into. If
Mhm.
private prisons are privately funded, you know what I mean? You can't, your only option, like, you're gonna just say, okay, this is illegal now. We're gonna basically have to buy this out, right?
Yeah.
And then, like, the private prisons, I don't know, it's kind of, I mean, I never been in prison. So I don't know. But I've heard some people compare like the private prisons to public, so oftentimes when the government is paying for stuff, they cut corners. You think about like going to the DMV, you think about how our veterans are treated, right? And
Mhm.
so kind of holding up private to public and things like that. So on one hand, you may have somewhat better facilities. However, the cons to that is when you're funded, your business model is keeping those beds full, right?
Yeah.
And the government has helped them do that. It's the freaking police, it's the state agents, because that's what they are. They're
Mhm.
hitmen for the freaking politicians. They're the ones funneling people to the private prisons. So how is that going
Yeah.
to affect policing? It's just, I mean, like you said, right? It's like, you know, when, we used to be in grade school and stuff like that, and even thinking about like middle school, and you'll have some kid that's like running for president and a student council, and they're like, it's gonna be Pizza Friday every
Every day,
Friday.
man.
Like, we're gonna have milk chocolate coming out of the water fountains. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like a whole bunch of just stuff. And it's like, it sounds good. It makes my ears perk up. But then how are you actually going to, you know, like implement these things?
definitely. Definitely need to hear more of that, and hopefully we have two more presidential debates. Hopefully that more of that comes out. This is the only vice presidential debate, which I was surprised. I was hoping we were going to get at least one more. Um, one thing that in these debates that has become to the forefront, and I'm not sure how many general Americans really know what fracking is. It's if you're not really paying attention to politics, I wonder how many people really know what that is. But that's come under fire. Specifically, Biden's been uh he's been damn, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm at a complete loss of words tonight. He's been accused of wanting to ban fracking. To our point earlier in what we talked about, there is this thing called Congress. A president cannot alone ban fracking. It doesn't
Right.
matter. Now his written plan is not an outright ban on fracking. Let's make that clear. But the Trump campaign seems like they're focused on pointing out and harping on the fact that Biden's going to ban fracking. That's not possible. It's not possible. Congress would have to approve that. What do you think about fracking? What do you think of becoming such a talking point in the two debates so far? And do you think people really understand the impact of fracking?
So that basically kind of just goes into, it basically kind of, so like they brought up like the Green New Deal and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. And from the Pence side, from the Trump Pence side of the argument, it's like you have to think about how this is actually going to affect the economy,
Mm-hmm.
right? To go such a different route with like your oils and your natural resources and things like this. And I don't I'm not super familiar with I can't really point and say, "Oh, like they're lying about, the banning fracking or
Mm-hmm.
whatever." I don't really know. I can't recall it being in any Kamala Harris or Joe Biden plan that I've seen. They may or may not have mentioned it. Another thing that um another thing that the Trump administration likes to do a lot is they like to accuse the Kamala and Joe Biden team of
Mm-hmm.
things that generally may be like some level of the Democrat platform, but those two might not be personally responsible for. So I don't know if some of that is kind of happening here.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure, but their actual position on fracking, I can only go by what was said in the debates tonight.
Okay.
I don't know. I do know they also mentioned something about the. I do know that Kamala, I think early on, was supporting to some extent like the Green New Deal and things like that, that takes a look at like our energy sources and, you know, but uh what was I about to say? And so they kind of call that out tonight and said that they do have a level of this still on their website.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure about
The,
that.
yeah. So the as far as the Green New Deal, it does say on the website that it's a crucial framework. That was called out specifically on here. In addressing climate change, which we haven't talked about yet, but it's it's one of those things where I think you have to dig deeper. If you just look at the surface, and again, a lot of this is all posturing and positioning. That's what this vice presidential debate has been. A lot of posturing from both sides. But what do you think about, since we're on that subject, about climate change? Kamala accusing them of not paying attention to science, being against science. Pence standing by that the climate is changing, but saying that he quoted some statistics saying it's not changing as much as people would have you believe. Where do you stand with the climate change?
So I will be super honest. I am not like very red on
Okay,
climate
climate
change.
change. Yeah.
I've heard different things about it. I've seen different things. Some of the stuff just doesn't make sense to me. Um I I more so lean on the side of, you know, I wouldn't go as far as to deny some level of climate change.
Mhm.
However, the thing is how you want to respond to it. Do you respond to climate change by just taking more of the taxpayers, you and I, taking more of our money when oftentimes government is just a failure? Just overall, they're just failures. You look at that high speed rail train that was being built in California, that the estimates were wrong, and so now they've stopped the building for it. This was supposed to help with like carbon emissions and supposed to be
Mhm.
more. What the heck happened? Like somebody dropped the ball, and that's like millions of dollars wasted. So it's not necessarily that I don't believe that climate change is not happening to some level. My problem is trusting this government to know how to handle it or what to do about it. I don't I don't see it. I don't see it. I liken this to a lot of the streets in the cities that are just crappy streets, and we keep every year we're giving you more and more money. We're paying more and more out in taxes, and
Mhm.
it's not being fixed. Like the infrastructure is just
Yeah.
crappy. So I don't that's one of those issues that I just the way it's been presented, like I went and read the Green New Deal when it was first presented by AOC, and I did a
Hmm.
breakdown, and some of this stuff just did not make sense to me. The response of you're like in California now, I think in 20-30 years, you're just gonna take people's like cars that use like gasoline.
Hmm.
You didn't pay for this car. You didn't pay for this car. Who do you think that's gonna affect the most? It ain't
Working
gonna be Jeff
families.
working families.
Yeah.
It ain't gonna be freaking Jeff Bezos. It's gonna be working families. I've known people that have kept their cars for literally 10 and 15, 20 years. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? And then that's another thing. Then when we start looking at the electric cars, we have to look at it in terms of, are they financially feasible for working class families? Then we have to look at, you recently had in California with all the fires, they was like, hell, we pulling the plug on y'all. So what I'm gonna do when I need to charge my car and zip across to the East Coast? You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So these are all things that we have to think about. It just can't be that surface level. Oh, forest fires, so let's freaking up taxes and take their cars and make them do solar panels. Solar panels. Now you got to think about all these people. I just,
I
ay,
think
ay,
I,
ay.
I think me and you both saying it as we keep talking about this is the bullet points are great. We got plenty of bullet points in these two debates. We got plenty of bullet points from both sides of these administrations so far. We need to know how. The how. I need to know the hows of how this shit is going to go down. To be honest with you, you can give me 1,000 bullet points and make it seem like we're going to be emissions free. The sky's going to be clear. The climate's going to go back to right. We're all going to pay less taxes. All those bullet points sound great, but without the how we're gonna get there, I don't. I like, and I get it. Like I said, we both said like it's this election almost isn't about convincing anyone. It's about strengthening those who already believe on one side or another. But for the people who are sitting on the fences, I feel like they're getting left in this because there's nothing that's been said by either side to me, in my opinion, that if I was unaware or if I was if I was trying to decide whose side I want to believe more, there's been no details given that would sway me on either way. It's been a lot of mudslaying at either party and a lot of talking about their lack of action, but we can only talk about lack of action so much where I need somebody to talk about actual actions you're going to take, and we're missing that.
Yeah. So that's just I think, at that point expectations are uh way too high,
Yeah.
honestly. And maybe that's just me being a little bit of a pessimist, but that's just what it is, especially in that level of format, especially when you're not gonna have a moderator that really just pushes back. Like you already have these,
Mhm.
pre-written questions and things like that. So I think tonight was actually a more favorable debate, that even with the bullet points, I think we still got in some of the things that they have done or may have not done,
Mhm.
um, and things that they hope to or look to do.
Last topic from the debate, other than the fly that tried to save America, because that fly that landed on Pence's head just cracked me the hell
Do
up.
you know I thought something was on my TV? I was like, "What the heck is that on my TV?"
Me and my 12-year-old daughter were watching this debate from start to finish, and at one point she's like, "Is that a fly on his head?" And I'm looking at it. I get up. She's like, "No, I think we may have a fly flying around here." And then right as she said that, he moved his head and the fly moved with it. I was like, "No, baby, that
The
fly is on
same
his head."
the
Oh,
same thing happened to me. I was literally about to go like this to my TV, and as soon as he went like this, and then the fly just flew away, and I'm like, that
man.
was crazy. That was crazy funny. It was almost like some type of 3D effect or something.
Yeah, between that and his eye being like, I tweeted out and it probably got a hell of retweets at this point. I was like, Pence is a zombie. This is confirmed it. Like he's turning to a zombie live on TV. Like, but but outside of that, one of the transfer of power is Trump going to leave office peacefully? And how this is the fact that this is even a thing. I had no idea that this was a possibility that a president could almost refuse to leave office. I'm sure it has to be. We're living in weird times in certain situations, but the more that this is gaining and the lack of true answers on it and the responses that we have gotten, it seems like if Trump does lose this election, it's not going to be it's not going to be the end of all the problems that some people perceive. It seems like it's going to be the start of a whole new set of ones. What do you think about that?
I think that whole there's not going to be a transfer of power. I think that's such a non-story. I
Okay.
think that's just as much of a non-story as, oh, he's going to go off and start these wars and we're going to be fighting with China and Russia and like all the other like non-stories. I just think that that's like every so often the media would come up with a total, it's like the story of him like riding around in his car with his mask on,
Mm.
with the freaking uh secret service that he has to be with anyway. It's just making it's a non-story. Like, so
Okay.
I don't think it's going to be a problem. I think the actual problem is going to be that because you have so many mail-in ballots, it's going to take forever. We are not I just don't think the election day we're going to know who the actual winner is. I just don't. I think it's going to take weeks to months. So is Trump going to talk his talk? Absolutely. It wouldn't be any other way. However, when it comes time for an actual transfer of power and thinking he's just going to seize the White House or do some type of crazy like action movie type something, have his like Air Force One circling the White House. Like, no. It's just a non-story, something that the media tries to do to get us hyped up and get people talking. I don't think it's gonna be like that. But I do absolutely think 100% there is going to be some friction even after the election day. People are going to hypothesize, who's won and this and the other. I think you're gonna have people on both sides of the aisle that are gonna be, super upset and worried and freaking out and things like this. But other than that, I think it's just gonna go on.
That's fair enough. Fair enough. All right. Last question to you and the people who are viewing live. I'll be watching the comments to see what you guys say. Overall, coming away from this debate, who do you feel? Who do you feel? I guess won it. Who do you feel won the debate? Who showed out the most to you? Who said the most that resonated with you in this debate?
I would say that Pence won the debate.
Okay.
And I would say that because up until halfway, I was like, there's no winners. I was like, there's been no standout moments. Um, I feel like, and let me make the distinction, right? Because you
Mm.
have two different type of people. I feel like if you were watching the debate more for like the entertainment value, more of like the I got you moment, Kamala Harris did have the I'm talking.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking,
Yeah.
you know, or she had the it was something else. You, I don't need a vice president to tell me. You know what I mean? Not to
Yeah.
be offensive, but I call this, the black girl moments.
Yeah.
Like I have mine. She reminds me of like a lady at the church. Like, I told you to sit down. You in here talking while the preacher talking. You know what I mean? Like that
Yeah.
type of vibe. So
Mm.
if we're talking about those black girl magic moments, I mean, yes, she absolutely had that. But for somebody like me that's not really looking for the entertainment value, that's looking for the legislation, the policy, what you've done and what you are going to do, Pence really standout moments to me where he like stole the show and it's like, all right, to me he won this was one, when he called her out for her record in California, when I think the Breonna Taylor thing came up, and it's basically like, okay, you care about Black Lives Matter so much. Why weren't you working on the First Step Act with us? Why didn't you support Tim Scott to end qualified immunity? What the heck did you actually do in California? He named the actual percentage number. I cannot remember the actual number, but he named the actual percentage of the Black men that went up in being imprisoned during her time. These are facts. These are on the record, okay? You killed her with that answer off top. The second thing was when it came to packing the courts. A lot of people who care about like the Supreme Court justice and getting the person they want to see on the Supreme Court, a lot of people care about that. It hasn't been something I really talked about, but a lot of people have been looking for this answer. And he directly turned to her and asked her, are y'all going to pack the courts or not? She talked all around a freaking answer. And then he goes on to say, well, it doesn't look like we're going to get an answer tonight. And neither did Joe Biden answer during his debate either. I got you. You talked around it. And another thing, one more thing for now, this is one is super personal, because I don't think most people would have even noticed this. But this is something that is crazy to me and it's killed me. Okay. One thing I heard him say during the debate was how Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were in support of taxpayer funded abortion, even up until the point of birth. Do you know she didn't even respond to that? Are you kidding me? How can somebody, if this is not true, it's no way you can accuse me of something like that. No freaking way. You can sit on here in national TV and accuse me of being okay with abortion up into birth. And I sit there and act like I didn't even hear you say it. Like, what? And I
That's
don't
a good
even
point,
think
and one that I missed completely.
I don't think most people noticed that, but one reason why I noticed it and it hit me so heavy is because I covered that story when Ralph Northam and the Asian lady. I'm not gonna try to remember her name because then I'll give her like some stereotypical like Chinese name or something. But when Ralph Northam and the city council, some type of representative Asian lady was literally talking about the bill that was allowing loopholes for children, for babies to be killed up into the 12th month. I mean the ninth month, the final
Oh wow.
Yes, I did the content covering this. And so that immediately stuck out to me like a freaking sore thumb. And I'm like, wow. You know what I mean? So for me, those are the three things that just I'm like, how, you know, and her stuff was throughout the debate, I just felt like too elusive. It was just too much talking points, right? Even when he talked about the First Step Act, he's like, this is what we did. Not only have you not done anything like that in California, you weren't even here as a time in Senate, as your time in the Senate. You weren't even standing alongside us when we were trying to do these things. So I just, as far as quality, as far as calling her to task and stand on her record, I think he won it.
And I can see your point on all of that. I think for me, Kamala won it not just for those black girl magic moments as you mentioned, but for the fact that during some of the stuff that Pence did not answer or kept going back to taxes, she did have an answer. She called them out for things that they did. I also think that the her stance, and I've talked about the bullet points were great, but a lot of people, those bullet points are going to be what they remember from the debate. And I think sometimes Pence's delivery, because he is so monotone and he's just matter of fact, hurts him when we're talking about in a debate stance. But I this honestly, and as much as like people, I know they're gonna want to hear me say that Kamala just ran away with this one, it just felt like one of those. It felt like the first round of a boxing match where both people are trying to figure each other out and they're dodging. Like it felt like both of them were dodging and posturing, and we didn't get enough answers from either one of them. That's just
I
my
do.
opinion.
I absolutely agree that it left me wanting more. Like I would
Yeah.
have liked to see one more debate from
Yeah.
them for
I feel
sure.
like I feel like they would have won another 20 minutes, especially with how it was progressing and how Kamala
Mhm.
was getting towards the end. I feel like those last 20 minutes would have been all perfect. And we probably would have got a lot of what we wanted. And then, going into next week with Trump and Biden again, it's just like I don't the clown show. I'm not really ready. I prefer this debate because I feel like we got more meat
I
in this
agree.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. If I even make it through the entire one of the next one, because that last one just that Joe Biden and Trump just gave me a headache.
Mhm.
So as far as like the debate style I would like to see, I enjoyed this way more, and I do feel like both candidates, because you're gonna have moments where you say a little stuff or whatever, whatever.
Mhm.
But I do feel that they were, more respectful of each other, and we could actually listen to them, right? We could
Yeah,
hear them, and then we could like digest and take in what they were actually saying, which we deserve that. We want to know what you have to say.
definitely.
Um,
Definitely. So before we end, I'm going to read a couple of the comments we got so far. So the first one, this was earlier on. This one was a little while ago from Sasha, who said Kamala definitely did say that she wanted to ban fracking at one point. I would have to check Kamala's record on if she's. I know that Biden hasn't outright said it, but if Kamala has, I don't doubt it. And I just missed it because transparency moment, I was not the biggest Kamala supporter leading up to the presidential run, so I haven't always paid as much attention to her and what she's had to say. So there we go on that one. Another one from Keith's dad. This one is, I don't think Pence had bullet points written down. I kept seeing Kamala constantly needed to look down at her notes even when discussing her own history. What do you think about that? Do you agree with that? I took it sometimes as her looking down to try to not cut off Pence, but maybe that's just my perspective on it. What do you think?
it did. Like I thought at some point she was writing things,
Mm-hmm.
but then it didn't seem like she would read or go back to what she was writing. So maybe you have some people that kind of write to like help provoke some thoughts
Yeah, for sure.
instead of reading
Mm-hmm.
what they've written, if that makes sense. So
Definitely. Definitely. Next one from Edward Ivy. Kamala Harris's record explains how she would be as a vice president. I mean, especially when you hear so much about reforming prisons and everything like that, and she's
but you was
served,
but
I
you
can
was
understand that.
you was smoking, you know what I'm saying? Back in your college days, and your record didn't represent that. So
Yeah.
I mean, you know, gotta be some truth to it. I don't know.
There you go. But that's really it. Rhonda, I want to thank you for your time. I know we're going late. It's past midnight here in Eastern Standard Time. So I know I kind of hit you up last minute last week, like, hey, do you want to do this? So I really appreciate you. Tell everyone where they can follow you and find you at, since Twitter wanted to ban you, which is crazy.
Man, I gotta find a way to sneak back onto Twitter, because Twitter is where the cool kids at. It's popping on Twitter. Like, but y'all, I am Rhonda Mary. You can find me Rhonda Mary on YouTube and on Instagram, since yes, I have been temporarily, hopefully, allegedly, banned from Twitter. But thank you so much for having me over
Anytime.
here. This is always like super fun. So I appreciate you. I'm proud of you. If anybody in the chat that is new to the Awakened Soul, he has a podcast where he is on how many times a week?
Just once a week. Just
Once
once
a
a
week.
week. Yeah.
Where he's on once a week, has tons of guests on different perspectives, covers a plethora of topics, and I've seen him grow so much over the last. How long have we been doing this now?
3 years now. 3.
3 years, and he
Yeah.
was the first person, the very first person to invite me onto his podcast, and I really, really am been super supportive. So I really appreciate that. I'm super supportive of you. If y'all are not, you know, get your Spotify, your Apple podcasting and all that good stuff and make sure you check him out.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm new to YouTube. I've been podcasting for 3 years. I've really only taken YouTube seriously probably over the last couple of months. I've been posting videos on and off for about a year now, but I really do see the benefit. I was terrified of video. I'm not gonna lie to you. I was terrified of video. But watching you for the last few years, I was definitely like, you know what, I need to go ahead. I need to go ahead and give this a try. So I'm glad that I've taken that leap. If this is your first time watching, you can follow us at the Awaken Soul Pod on Instagram and Twitter. I'll put a link. I don't think I put it in the description, but I'll re-add it to the description where you can find all of all the podcast versions. I've been posting, so my podcast is segmented. I have 3 different segments. Last week was the first time I posted all 3 segments in video form on the YouTube page. But if you want to listen to full episodes, make sure you go and check out the podcast version. But Rhonda, again, thank you as always. Thank you for your support over this time and your guidance and teaching me how to do this video thing a little bit better. But I'm out. We out this month.
You didn't surpass me. What you mean? Like, look at got the colors popping with the t-shirt all matching and like everything. But all right, thank you. All right, y'all. Bye.
Peace.